guys, welcome to today's video on reacting masses. We are going to be having a look at some of the 4-mark calculations likely to be on your paper 1 chemistry exam. This is the first worked example that we are going to be having a look at. So let's start by just reading through the questions and highlighting the information along the way. The equation for the reaction between nitrogen and hydrogen to produce ammonia is below. Calculate the mass of hydrogen that is needed to produce 25 grams of ammonia. Now that is immediately telling me that the only parts of the equation above that I am going to need are my hydrogen and my ammonia. So those are the parts I'm going to be focused on. It's given me my relative atomic masses and asked me for the mass of hydrogen. This is a 4-mark question. As soon as we're looking at this, we are knowing that we are going to need to use moles. So we are going to start by just making a note of the 2 reactants we are looking at. We have got 3H2 and we have got 2NH3. It's really important we identify those correctly at the beginning. I can now sort of ignore that top little part, and I'm now worried about this sentence here. I'm trying to calculate the mass of my hydrogen, and I've been given the mass of my ammonia. So I'm going to just record that here. The mass of my ammonia, which is NH3, is 25 grams. I'm then going to have a look at my relative formula mass. Now, I haven't been given this in this question. Some of my examples I will be given the relative formula masses for, but in this case I'm going to have to calculate it. So I have NH3. The only thing I need for my formula mass is the NH3. I'm ignoring the 2. So my nitrogen, I've got 1 nitrogen, so it's 14 times 1, plus my 3 hydrogens, so it is 3 times 1. That's going to give me a relative formula mass of 17. Okay? And with that, I can start to now think about moles. In order to access these questions, we have to know our molar equation. So we have to know that moles is equal to mass divided by our relative formula mass. And we can keep that in a formula triangle to refer to later on. But here, if I want to calculate my moles, I'm going to take my mass and divide it by my relative formula mass. Notice how I am showing my working out at every single stage here. Without the working out, you do not get to the marks. And I'm going to use a calculator to give me my answer. Now my answer is a very long number. You're going to not round until the end of the question. So I'm going to write a good amount of the numbers on the sheet. My unit for moles is mole. And I now need to consider the final thing, which is my molar ratio. My molar ratio is the numbers at the front of my chemical formula up here. So I've got a molar ratio in this example of 3 to 2. And I need to consider, how do I get to the 3 from the 2? I would multiply by 1.5. And I'm going to apply this rule to the number of moles above. I multiply by 1.5. I'm going to use my calculator, and that will give me my moles as 2.205882335 moles. I'm now at a point where I can look at my relative formula mass for hydrogen. I've got 2 hydrogen atoms with a mass of 1, so it will be 2 times 1 is equal to 2. And I can now calculate my mass, and I've got my formula triangle up here. If I want to calculate mass, I'm going to cover up the mass and that tells me it's moles multiplied by MR. In this case, it's going to be 2 multiplied by 2.205888235, which is going to equal 4.41 grams. My final answer then for this question is 4.41 grams. In terms of where the marks come from here, I get 1 mark for calculating the moles. I get my second mark for the correct answer. So I get 1 mark for the working, 1 mark for the answer. I get my third mark for this correct rearrangement here, and I get my final mark for the correct answer at the end. So even if you are not sure on this end part, if you calculate moles, you will get half of the marks. This is the second worked example for today. So again, I'm going to read through my question and highlight all of the important information. Gold reacts with the elements in group 7 of the periodic table. 0.17 grams of gold reacts with chlorine. So I know that my gold is reacting with chlorine, and I've got my product here, which will be gold chloride. I want to know to calculate the mass of chlorine needed to react with the 0.175 grams of gold. Importantly, there's an extra step here, which is to give your answer in milligrams. This will therefore be a 5-mark question. And in this case, it's also given me my relative atomic masses. So I'm going to start my table the same way. I know that I'm looking at chlorine and I'm looking at gold. So these are going to be the headers of my column. I'm going to start with the mass, which I've been given for my gold, which is 0.175 grams. My relative formula mass for gold has been given to me here. It's only 1 atom, so my relative atomic mass is just 197. I am then going to calculate my moles. Now moles is going to be equal to the mass divided by the relative formula mass, which is going to give me 0.175 divided by 197, which gives me a value of 8.8832487 times 10 to the minus 4. Again, that is not everything on my calculator, but I need to write a huge amount of it because we do not round until the very end. I'm then going to look at my molar ratio. Reminder that my ratio comes from these numbers at the front. So in this case, I have a 2 to 3 ratio. 2 to 3. In order to get from 2 to 3, I will multiply by 1.5. So I am going to do the same here for my moles. I'm going to multiply by 1.5. I'm going to put that into my calculator, and that gives me a value of 1.3324871 times 10 to the minus 3. Again, I am just copying exactly what is in my calculator. I now need to look at the relative formula mass for Cl2. Well, chlorine has a mass of 35.5, so I've got 35.5 multiplied by the 2 atoms to give me 71. And my final step then, and remember I'm showing my working at every single stage, is that 71 multiplied by my 1.3324871 times 10 to the minus 3 is going to give me a value of 0.0946 grams. Okay, I can start to round now. I am at the end. That is nearly the end point, but for this example we have this extra step. I need to give my answer in milligrams. To get from grams to milligrams, I am going to multiply by 1,000 to give me my final answer, of 94.6 milligrams. That is my final answer in this example. This exam question. The question will stay on the screen for 10 seconds. Please make sure you pause the video to have a go. The mark scheme will follow. Make sure that you show your working on every single part of the question, because if you don't show your working, you do not get the marks. Scheme for question 1. In terms of where your marks are coming from, you will get 1 mark for writing your working out and 1 mark for the correct number of moles of hydrogen. You will get your 3rd mark for showing 2 moles times 36.5 and your final mark for giving the correct mass. This is question 2. Again, make sure to show your working and remember to give your answer to 3 significant figures. Again, pause the video to have a go at this question. Here is the mark scheme for question 2. In terms of where your marks are coming from, you'll get 1 mark for your correct working out of the moles and 1 mark for the correct moles. Remember, you do not round until the end. You get 1 mark for your final correct calculation of the mass with your working, your final answer, and the 3 significant figures at the end will get you your final mark on that 5-mark question. The 3rd question, you have 10 seconds. Please pause the video to have a go at the question. A look at the mark scheme, please, for question 3. Again, you will have 1 mark for your working out of the moles, 1 mark for your final mole answer. You will get your 3rd mark for the calculation of the mass and the final mark for the correct final mass. Final question of this video. Please pause the video and have a go. Make sure you give your answer to 3 significant figures. And this is the final mark scheme for this video. Again, you will get your 1 mark for calculating the moles, 1 mark for the correct mole value, 1 mark for your correct calculation of the mass, 1 mark for the correct value of the mass, and 1 mark for the significant figures. Thank you guys for watching the video. Please come by and see me if you need any help, and good luck.